It's no secret that Oldschool Runescape is experiencing a rather exciting growth in popularity. In just the past 2 years, the player count has increased exponentially and is likely to surge even higher with Volamore Part 3 and its first ever new skill, Sailing. The future for OSRS looks bright. However, there are some, arguably many, areas in need of improvement to assure that the influx of new players are greeted with a world that is both dangerous and mysterious, but still welcoming. Beyond the music and charming aesthetics, RuneScape can feel a little bit obtuse, confusing, unintuitive when compared to other competing games. On one hand, this friction is not only part of the charm, it's part of what makes people so invested in the game itself. I spoke about this in one of my very first videos when I theorized that the more demanding a game is, the more connected to it its players become. Of course, there's a limit. If something has too much friction, then nothing moves. Too little friction, nothing sticks. Threading that needle, balancing it on an impossible scale is, well, impossible, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. One of the biggest hurdles to jump over in Oldschool Runescape is the first week playing it. The moment you zone into Lumbridge and see everything and nothing simultaneously. Tutorial Island is legendary, a classic, but it only tutorializes something in the most rudimentary sense. RuneScape, after all, is about repetition, so doing something once in a tutorial isn't enough to really accustom yourself to the binary forms that define every single interaction in the game. Put simply, tell me if you've ever had this experience. You, being super awesome sexy, love Oldschool Runescape, but you have one problem. None of your real friends play. So you pitch them, telling stories of the nuanced questing system, the rewarding progression, the interconnectivity of skills. You sell the game as what it is, one of the most complex and unique MMOs ever made. Your friend creates an account, does the tutorial, zones into Lumbridge and chops trees for 2 hours, then quits. A lack of guidance is at once freeing and stifling. When you're too free, when your peripheral vision becomes your only vision, all you see is indistinguishable possibilities, and therefore, don't pick a path. Choose a direction. You end up chopping logs for 2 hours or mining until you can't take it anymore. While some old heads may argue that this is good for the game, that is the main experience and how new players should experience the game, because that's how they did it back in 1915, but Gramps, I'm sorry. Archduke Franz Ferdinand has long since been dead. We have LCD monitors now and virtually hundreds of new games available at our fingertips at any given time. We don't just have $5 and a dream or 30 minutes a day for game time dictated by overbearing yet loving parents. Attention is fleeting, and we all want the game to succeed, not just by retaining the long-addicted players, but by attracting new blood. MMOs are reliant on that. Every day someone quits, even RuneScape, and every day, hopefully, someone new joins, maybe 2 someone news. And as long as those who join outnumber those who leave, you have a growing, successful MMO. While that number is great in Oldschool Runescape right now, that shouldn't be a reason to stay complacent. Our sister game, RuneScape 3, is struggling in no small part because of how antiquated and, quite frankly, horrible the onboarding experience is. In this video, I will outline some of the issues with the onboarding and pitch an idea to fix it, at least somewhat. It won't be perfect, it won't be a cure-all, but I firmly believe that it could alleviate some of those first week quitters. I'm sure many of you have noticed an influx of World of Warcraft players hot on the heels of many WoW streamers checking OSRS out. I don't want to use a streamer's first time as a standard though. Each and every one of these creators is popular enough to have a living chat that is backseating endlessly. This is frustrating, but also helpful if a creator is ever lacking direction. Glance over to the chat and then deduce a path. Most players don't have this benefit. In fact, I think there are only 2 kinds of OSRS newbies. 1, the follower, and 2, the explorer. Everyone else quits. The follower follows. They open up a wiki page with a new player guide and check off the boxes until they're done. This familiarizes them to the game loop and invests them in the systems. The explorer explores. They walk around, chop trees, do a few quests, and have a more traditional, old-school RPG experience. Both of these approaches have some strange flaws. The follower is crucially disconnected from the game, being forced into external websites to track progression for them, creating a reliance on external sources and what I would call a muted first-time experience. Everyone enjoys games differently, and that's why I still support this method of play. Hell, I even encourage it in OSRS, depending on who I'm talking to. The issue isn't with following a guide, that's great. It's with how reliant on externals that guide following is. It makes you more focused on web pages than the game itself. That's why I'm unironically in support of Quest Helper in some situations. The latter, Explorer, seems more pure and lovable, right? The issue is, it's like 0.1% of the entire player base. Unless you're making guideless content a la Alien Food and Mad Season, most people do not play the game this way. We can't rely on them sustaining the population because they account for so little of it. The most efficient way to approach OSRS is by questing. Early game quests yield the most noticeable bumps in experience and do a decent enough job at teaching some of the binary functions of the game. A quick detour. When I say binary functions of RuneScape, what I'm doing is breaking down the way interactions work in the game. Every single action in RuneScape is defined by a 1-0 function, an input and an output. The complexity of the game is created by stringing these binary functions together and creating one-tick flick inferno while high-alching magic shortbows or something. This is the language of the game, something everyone learns as they play. What metaphorical word is created by attaching an orb to a battle staff, noting it, and high-alching? Whatever it is, it's different than attaching onyx bolt tips to runite bolts and high-alching those, even though the process is very similar. Understanding that you can do those things only depends on your linguistic knowledge of the game itself. You know that by using one item on another, you'll get one of two outputs. Nothing interesting happens, or an actual result. This feels intuitive to the experienced player, but I must remind everyone that most games do not work this way. Teaching someone RuneScape is akin to teaching them a new language, one that, as I've said many times in prior videos, does not translate to other games and vice versa. Hey, quick interlude here. I want to thank everyone for watching. I know some of my videos may be controversial, especially when criticizing certain long-term elements of RuneScape. Even if you disagree with these criticisms, I hope you can see that I'm coming from a genuine place, wanting the game to grow and remain successful. If you enjoy my content, consider liking and subscribing. It means the world. So to return back to efficiency, it's questing, and the only way to know this is through the wiki page or other external guides, and to do it efficiently as a new player is to download a plugin, something you once again only know about externally. The goal isn't to fast-track new players to efficiency, but to demonstrate enough of the game's systems to have them arrive at efficient outputs naturally. You don't want to solve a puzzle for someone, just give them all the pieces to do it for themselves. A series that I and many others have grown fond of is Mad Season's journey into Oldschool Runescape. For those that don't know, he's a WoW content creator that has been playing OSRS with no guides and no prior knowledge for months. It's at once a frustrating and hilarious and rewarding experience to see him figure things out. It's also revealing of many of the obtuse elements of the game that have become standard in a player's lexicon only because it has been propagated through external resources, videos, guides, etc. When Mad Season does figure out an efficient method, when he does piece together a truly rewarding binary, it's incredible, such as him deducing how to splash or even how to vendor to general stores in a non-wasteful manner. It's demonstrative of just how needlessly hidden so many of these answers are, but also exhilarating to figure out. The goal would be to retain the exhilaration while filing down some of the unnecessary friction. I want to remind everyone that not all friction is unnecessary. In fact, friction is incredibly important. But how do we do this? Well, for vendoring, it can be as easy as adding a small icon in each general store that showcases a percentage of profit lost from vendoring a single item. If you sell one item for 100 GP, the next one may be worth 90 without you knowing, so that percent would read 90, then 80, and so on. A simple, clean icon that is legible. OSRS has so many puzzles to solve that extend thousands and thousands of hours into the future. Softening the edge of some early ones will not ruin anyone's experience. In fact, by teaching them core functionalities, you open up the opportunity for actual theory crafting. You've given them a path to take and a mind for figuring out future, more complex and more interesting puzzles. Place a chessboard in front of someone who's never seen it before and they'll likely walk away. Now place a chessboard in front of someone and explain the rules? Well, they might actually play. By elaborating on how something works, you're not spoiling the experience of chess, because chess is so much deeper than just its basic rule set. All of this is to say that I think Oldschool Runescape should have an optional onboarding experience past the tutorial island that isn't the current activity tracker or its associated new player guide thing. I think a full revamp, utilizing many of the newly understood and enjoyed elements of RuneScape, could transform potential players into mainstays. For a lot of old school players, all of this probably sounds like heresy. Here is a newish YouTuber who has only played for slightly less than 2 years telling us that our game needs to be made simpler and more linear. Before I get into the details of what I'm suggesting, I want to reiterate that I'm not advocating for redesigning the new player experience. I think it is, right now, beautiful and charming and not all too bad. What I am advocating for is an option to guide players into multiple paths and teach them what the game really is. Because for as easy as it is to look at a sandbox like OSRS and say, well, you can just do whatever you want, that doesn't actually mean anything. I can't build a nuke and threaten the King of Varrock with imminent detonation lest he gives me all the gold in his vault, no matter how much I may want to. There is no uranium in Oldschool Runescape. I've checked. It's only easy to do what you want in RuneScape if you actually know what you can do in RuneScape. That's why a new player's experience is often just meandering around with 0 run energy, chopping some trees, and logging off. Show people what they can do, and then let them. I did a small poll in my community to gauge what a general audience thinks of an expanded onboarding experience. The response was split. And I think the reason for this is because a lot of players immediately assume that granular onboarding looks like an on-rails tutorial, when that is not necessarily the case. A reasonable concern is that a guidance route would put everyone on an identical path, which is why I think creating broad goals and showcasing different ways of achieving those goals would be the ideal. Now, let's get on to the pitch. Setting goals is the lifeblood of OSRS. A goal in this case just means direction. It is a form of guidance, since once it's set, you have to piece together the different ways to actually achieve it. These goals are comprised of dozens, if not hundreds, of sub-goals. In other words, tasks. It's a puzzle, but it's also a maze, a labyrinth, wherein every single turn you make leads to 3 more. That's part of the enjoyment, a rabbit hole that you delve into further and further until you wind up forgetting what you originally planned and then eventually looping back to it. Getting players into that cycle is the ideal, and it's not something that is immediately attainable or understandable if you've never played RuneScape before. Imagine you just created a new character, did Tutorial Island, and zoned into Lumbridge. On the top left of your screen, you will notice a blinking UI element that, if clicked, opens up the Adventurer's Journal. Note, you can just also ignore this, X out, and go on your merry way. The idea here is to showcase what the game has to offer early on and present the most exciting core loops of OSRS. To do this, I looked toward leagues. For those who have played leagues, I myself maxed an account. What is the best part? Is it the expedited experience rates, the increased drops, the ability to become incredibly overpowered? No, of course not. It's the happy fun time chemicals that release every single time you complete a league's task. For those who don't know, league's tasks are hundreds of individual missions, ranging from simply picking up wheat to killing a boss 100 times. Each mission is weighted and ranked and gives you points you'll eventually spend on cosmetic items that you can carry into the main game. Upon completing a task, a small pop-up fades onto your screen and you feel just that little bit more addicted. Why not add that to the new player experience? Not only would it translate perfectly since it's already an existing UI feature, but it would also teach prospect players about the game. In this UI feature, you'd be presented with short-form goals. Here are some examples. Defeat Elvarg, obtain 2 pieces of the Pyromancer outfit, subdue Tempros 10 times. Each one of these goals are achievable, yet far enough away to actually be goals. They also come with a small description of what they would entail, the kinds of skills included, the level of challenge, and so on. A new player would then click on one and be presented with a Leagues-esque list of tasks. Introductory tasks would be simple and explanatory, from Cook's Assistant to describing what armor bonuses mean. Then they would broaden as the player becomes more accustomed to the basic functionality of OSRS. Broadening tasks is how you facilitate exploration. Instead of telling someone to do a specific thing, you're telling them to explore an option. Getting familiar with a game isn't an on-rails experience, it's very much a self-determining one. You need to be the vehicle for your own success. I don't want everyone to approach the game identically, so by broadening goals and offering suggestions rather than demands, we can achieve a much more diverse playstyle. For example, to take down Elvarg, you could do the waterfall quest to immediately bump up your levels, but if you're afraid of the risk or don't enjoy questing, what about training on X or Y creature? What about completing a Porcine of Interest and learning about Slayer? Pick an option, it's something you'll do for thousands of hours in the future. The best part is that you can pursue and complete these goals in any way you want. Ultimately, these tasks are just a roundabout way to filter players into decent progression methods, but the real endpoint is killing Elvarg, completing Dragon Slayer. So if a player decides to take their own path to get there, they can, and still receive the reward. For slaying Elvarg, maybe they could receive a upgraded version of the anti-dragon shield that reflects their achievement. A cool element of living in a curated sandbox MMORPG is that these developer-dictated goals could change at any time. If we're afraid of every new player following the same path, then mixing things up is more than possible. New content, especially new early game content, facilitates new goals. Instead of Elvarg, what about Amoxliatl in Valamor? Fundamentally, the issue with the current adventure path system is that while it is broad, it's also incredibly short form and doesn't actually teach you anything about the game. Get 10 strength, it says, but like, so? And what do I do with that? Does it mean anything? The answer to these questions is only found on the wiki or by sifting through the UI and deducing that yes, you could maybe at one point do something with that. A specific goal that is achieved broadly is much more captivating than just a broad goal. Getting 10 or even 50 strength is functionally meaningless when players aren't familiar with what strength even is or what content opens up from leveling it. I also don't like the rewards here. For example, by completing the Gatherer path, you get some skilling resources, which is nice, but also a lamp, an experience bump. But like, why would a new player care about that? They don't know the value of experience yet. With this updated system, each skilling-related task could also do a better job of introducing players into more contemporary ways of training. I'm not saying tick manipulation, but more so Giant's Foundry, for example. Of course, Temporos for fishing, or even Karambwans if they want to do something more AFK. I think the worst thing a new player can do is just fish shrimp until they get bored. That may have worked in 2005, but it really doesn't in 2025. Once they've completed these tasks, achieved those goals, they'd have a much better idea of what the game offers while still feeling like there is so much left to explore. Because there is. After completing one of these goals, they may not only receive a small reward for their effort, but also get introduced to future goals as well, except this time they'd be expected to pursue them on their own. Defeated Elvarg? Consider training to join the Warriors Guild. Get yourself one of those newfangled defenders. Or, if you want a greater challenge, I heard there's an arena to test the bravest players under a volcano on Karamja. Do you have an itch to quest? Have you heard about the brand new continent of Valamor? And if you want to suffer, maybe Rooftop Agility is more your vibe. Okay, maybe not that one, but Hollowed Sepulchre, Motherlode Mine, Blast Furnace, and so on. Now that a new player has experienced the core loop of OSRS many times, they would have substantially more confidence with approaching the rest of the world without external guides, or even internal ones. They can navigate thanks to questing, they can skill, and they can fight, at least a little bit. This wouldn't remove all of the wiki's purpose either, but it would alleviate what feels like a forced reliance. I don't want this game to drift further into complexity without accounting for players that aren't already familiar with it. Much like I wouldn't want today's reliance on plugins without a client integration. There's a reason why I'm so critical of World of Warcraft's add-on reliance, and it's not just because they make combat a bop it. It's because every new player is immediately told to log the fuck off and download a different thing and go down a list of recommended add-ons that flood the game UI with incomprehensible jargon just to accustom themselves with a standard that they're expected to meet in the endgame. There is plenty to adjust and tune with my idea, but what to me is undeniable is that it gives purpose and goals to those who need it most. Oldschool Runescape is no longer a simple clicking simulator. It has not only a depth of systems, but a depth of gameplay. If someone is expected to learn how to Olm skip, then they should probably be taught what a stab bonus is, and most crucially of all, taught it in the game itself. I'm not sure if others agree with me, but OSRS is unique because one of the most enjoyable features of the game isn't in learning a mechanic for the first time, but in perfecting that mechanic with the setup you have. Once I learned Chambers of Xeric or the Tomes of Amasket, it became incredibly rewarding to bring less resources and more gear, more niche items that could speed up my runs. I loved figuring out what gear worked and what gear didn't. I've recently been grinding Fasani's Nightmare and piecing together what spec weapons to bring, how many mage switches, if I could camp Ultor or Lightbearer. It's all a puzzle that becomes more complex in time, but it's also a puzzle that is unique to me, unique to the items I have. None of this would be possible if I never learned the basic fight mechanics or the basic core mechanics defining the game itself. The most rewarding element only made itself visible after the fact. I don't think depriving new players from this is satisfactory. Here are just a few mechanics or elements in the game that I would personally love to see explained somewhere as you play. A max hit tracker, perhaps just a small piece of UI near your strength bonus so people don't have to either guess or use external DPS simulations. The fact that running skips tiles, set bonuses, and unique item effects being a lot more visible than they are now. Perhaps just whenever you equip an item, there's a small flashing icon that explains where to see individual bonuses like this. Only the first time though. I'm sure there are dozens more as well, so if you can think of another one, comment down below. Every one of these features doesn't need to be explained, but this should elucidate just how much there is in the game that simply exists somewhere in the background for most players, feeling like an invisible yet very real hurdle to leap if they ever want to engage deeper in the systems. Put bluntly, I want to exist in a RuneScape where people are more open to just doing shit without researching what that shit is beforehand. The only way to achieve that is through teaching them all the different shit there is to do. This would be just one step in the right direction. Imagine how many new and returning players are going to be checking out sailing, what is certainly the second most popular MMORPG's first new skill, a skill that can be done very, very early on in the game. Now imagine those same excited players realizing that they have no clue how the game works, and now they have to do research on the other monitor just to figure out what's going on. Thankfully, Oldschool Runescape is intuitive once you get the fundamentals of its language, but most people can't learn a language without first grasping its alphabet. I think it's on Jagex to give every person in-game the alphabet. Teach them how to string together simple words, and then let them write their own stories.